Today's discussion will be presented in 3 sections since we are recording it for a radio broadcast on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. You're welcome to post questions and comments during the session and we'll try to answer them online. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Tom Temin, host and managing editor of the Federal Drive on Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com.
Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guests today are Wally Coggins, Director of the IC Security Coordination Center in the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Paul Morris is Chief Information Security Officer and Executive Director of the Information Assurance and Cybersecurity Division at the Transportation Security Administration. Rick Driggers is Deputy Chief of Operations of the National Cybersecurity and Communications Integration Center at the Department of Homeland Security. Ian Doyle, Executive Security Advisor at IBM Federal, and Jeff Wichman, Practice Director for Enterprise Incident Management at Optiv. Gentlemen, good to have you on today. And why don't we begin with the government people and just give us an idea of what your incident and response plan kind of looks like today, with some emphasis on how things have evolved over the past months. There's certainly been enough incidents in the cybersecurity world these past few months, let alone these past few years, that would, I think, cause people to want to update their programs and kind of maybe adjust them to the approaches depending on what is out there for threats. So Wally, why don't we start with you?
The IC Security Coordination Center, our mission is to coordinate the incident response for the intelligence community. We do that through continuous two-way communication with the 17 agencies, their incident response centers that make up the intelligence community. We also work closely with our federal cybersecurity partners, Cybercom at DoD, and my colleagues' organization, NKIC, at the Department of Homeland Security. The program that we have today, it is a dynamic environment that we're dealing with. The threat's always changing, as you said, and we're continuously assessing, evaluating our incident response plan. We really have 3 big areas that we're focusing on this year. Automating the data flows between the Security Coordination Center and the agencies across the community to improve the speed at which we're getting information on vulnerability management, safeguarding posture, endpoint security, as well as incidents as they're occurring. That's an important point of emphasis for us. Another area is integrating functional areas that traditionally have been stovepiped and haven't worked closely together. A good example of that is bringing counterintelligence individuals and experts in to work with our cybersecurity personnel in the analytical cell to work on the nexus of where insiders are dealing with, or insiders can potentially using cyber capabilities to carry out their malicious intent. And then the final area is we're running a continuous exercise program, a series of tabletop exercise, war games, live range exercises, where we're working with the community to test realistic, complex scenarios, test the response to them, and share lessons learned, best practices, and build the partnerships for when real incidents occur that we can respond quickly.
Okay, and Paul, at TSA, plenty of going on there at that agency any time.
At TSA, we have a 24/7 security operations center, very attuned to our mission operations across all the airports in the nation. And over 65,000 folks that work with us, as well as trying to protect the mission and systems that provide everybody the ability to enroll in pre-check or actually just get a ticket and fly. So very attuned to that. We learned a lot. I mean, this really started back when we had the heartbeat response, and there's been more of these where we've really rallied, but it's really tested us over the last year of the tools we had, the processes we exercised. How could we get faster, be more flexible, and respond quicker? And that comes with we're one of many components within DHS. Our SOCs are constantly talking to each other, and the DHS SOC up to the NKIC. And I really look at that as an early warning system. Something happens, we know about it fairly quickly, and it allows us to be able to respond and start to marshal forces. And that's really something that we've started to exercise. Now, to get to that, one of the things you think about cyber hygiene, when you respond quickly, you have to know what you have and where it's at. These vulnerabilities come down to a specific type of equipment or system, whereas and we have quite a few systems that are disparate and managed by other folks. So, and plus we've introduced some new tools. The ability for us now to quickly, within 5 minutes, search our systems that we can see, have we been compromised with what's being talked about. That gives us an assurance that we can quickly respond. But then there's you're fighting on the fact that there's a bunch of different screens that are sitting in front of a SOC analyst. They're manually moving through data and typing over here, and there's a lot of opportunity there for us to do better. So where we're going is how do we coordinate against the systems that we can't see, the owners? Do we have the right response? PPD 41 has really start to think about organizational response. Do we have the right visibility across all of our portfolios of risk, vulnerability, the things that the SOC needs to respond to? So that's driving how we now build things, how our tools are integrated, and then how we respond. And I want to be able to ask the question, well, what if? And if we have an infection, is that going to affect here? How can I isolate so we can continue to operate in the face of a cyber attack?
All right, sounds pretty comprehensive, what we're getting here. And at DHS, kind of the mother of all civilian cybersecurity agencies, Rick.
Yeah. So at the NCIC, we lead the federal organization for coordinating nationwide efforts to detect, to prevent, and respond to and recover from cyber as well as communication threats and incidents. We follow the model of the National Cyber Incident Response Plan, which is a national approach to dealing with cyber incidents. Also addresses the role that the private sector, state and local governments, and multiple federal agencies also play with responding to incidents, and also how the actions all fit together in an integrated response. Back in September, we fully integrated all of our hunt and incident response capabilities into one organization within the NCIC. We have responded to 23 incidents to date, and are on track now with the calendar year FY17 to do a lot more incident response, and that's not only across the federal government departments and agencies if they request assistance, but also state and local and private sector as well. Also, in terms of new approaches, or not new approaches, but what are we doing differently? We're certainly getting more in tune with the intelligence community so that we can understand what the threat landscape looks like so that we can be prepared. We're also working more closely with private sector IT security firms and want to continue that relationship. The most important piece of the NCIC and what we do is our partnerships, not only with federal departments and agencies, but also state and local and private sector. And the ability to share information, the ability to have a trusted partnership and relationship with those entities so that we can support them and we can leverage the capabilities and the service offerings that we have to mitigate and to recover from cybersecurity incidents.
And just let me ask you a follow-up on those partnerships. How much do state and local agencies and governments feed into all this? Are they under the same kind of siege that sometimes it seems like the federal government is under?
So certainly, I don't know that it's to the level, but certainly they have their own cybersecurity issues at the state and local level. They probably have some resource issues as well, being able to respond to those. So we certainly provide support to them when asked. We also, a lot of the state and local communities are taking part of our cyber hygiene, which is an IP scanning program that we have. We have over 500 entities across the federal government, private sector, and state and local government that are taking advantage of the cyber hygiene program that we have, which offers, like I said earlier, IP scanning and provides reports weekly out to those entities of what their security and vulnerability issues are.
Okay, and Jeff, I wanted to ask you, looking across government, our main subject today is incident and response. You have to know you have an incident before you can respond, and given the dwell times and the stealthiness of some of these things, what's your sense of how government is coming along with respect to incident detection and then the response that rolls out from that?
Yeah, I think the government is doing a bang-up job. These gentlemen have highlighted all of the really critical components to effectively responding to an incident. You have to know what's in your environment and how to respond to it. Everybody needs to know the processes. And that's really the most important part in dealing with an incident, is really being prepared. And that's one of the things that we all see stepping into the commercial sector, is where a lot of failures start to occur, is they believe they understand what their processes are, however they don't test them adequately or enough, and that's where they start feeling the burn.
All right, so the earlier up in the chain of kill, I guess, that you're aware and have plans, the better are you will be downstream when something happens. Okay, and IBM has been working on this since time immemorial. What's new? What do things look like now versus, I would say, 6 months ago?
Sure. I think there's certainly an evolution process. So we talked a little bit about, there are certain things to prevent cybersecurity incidents, and there are certain things to detect them, maybe even advanced detection. But now we're really seeing the pendulum swing towards more increased response actions. So it's one thing to say, I have things that can prevent certain things happening. I can find my assets. I can detect things. But how do I bridge that gap between what a SOC analyst is doing to do some research with an incident handler to actually take action? And we're trying to introduce not just linear automation from making sure that if something happens, there is a definitive action to take place, but what is that automated orchestration? So workflows of processes, not just technology, but people and processes themselves. So this way, again, I think we were mentioned earlier, how can we shorten the return cycle of not just finding an incident, but then taking the effective action to remediate it?
And is attribution part of that process?
Absolutely.
I mean, you can't shoot back, in this sense, but attribution is just checking things. And
Sure, and attribution, so you know where a particular cybersecurity event or offense is coming from, so you know what particular remediation actions are probably the best suited for that type of incident per se.
And I wanted to also go through the government one more time and talk about some of the routine jobs. I mean, since there has been continuous monitoring, and this goes back now close to, I think, 10 years since it became a mandate for federal agencies. And early on, continuous monitoring was, well, let's find out what's patched and what's not patched. How are we on the automation scale of things like patch management? Old issue, predates continuous monitoring, really, if truth be told, and other routine types of tasks that might be early on in that kill chain for cybersecurity.
Automation's been a point of emphasis for the Security Coordination Center and the community as a whole for some time now, as you said. We're seeing it in the areas of vulnerability management, patch management, incident response, and where we're getting into is the sharing of indicators and threats and things like that is where we're moving forward. But you really have to automate these days in this time when it's really hard to attract and retain cybersecurity professionals. Automation is a force multiplier. It lets you do more with the resources that you have. It lets you focus them, prioritize them on the real important threats, and hopefully resolve without human intervention the more benign technical issues and false positives and things like that are always occurring.
Is it possible to automate patch management? I mean, patch management was at the heart of the WannaCry vulnerability for many organizations.
Certainly, that's a capability that we've seen deployed extensively throughout the intelligence community.
Okay, and is that the case at TSA?
Really, I'm not in a hurry to have a self-inflicted denial of disservice on a patch that went wrong. I mean, we really looked at how do we improve our cyber hygiene in those regards. But there are certain vendors where a patch will come out and it'll go in and nothing will break. We've got history shows that so we've shortened those cycle times of testing. But there are others that you never know if you're going to have something that'll break a mission application, that'll shut something down that we need vital at an airport or somewhere. So we take that time. I think that there's opportunities there for orchestration in some cases. You're never going to. I think you'll never take out a human out of some of these critical processes when we're supporting these mission needs. But you're absolutely right. Yeah, it comes down to we just need to be flexible and have data available to make decisions. And if we can shorten the amount of time that the folks that are doing that hard work are spent doing menial tasks, and it's just the same problem we had in the intelligence community back in 15 years ago. How can we move those folks from doing 80% admin and 20% real thinking and flip that? So that's what we're trying to do. How can I get my SOC analyst really thinking about the hard problems and focus on the priorities instead of doing all of that work? So that's that. I think that's where the orchestration piece will really lead us.
Yeah, that's an important thing you say, that often patch, and this goes back to the early dawn of operating systems. When you would upgrade, then your peripherals wouldn't work, or this wouldn't work, or your database access would be broken, whatever the case might be. And so at a given location at TSA, there are a lot of systems running. Do you do anything like maintain a model system or a sample system that you can try things on in a closed environment, then know that it works, and then send it out to all the locations?
Absolutely. We have comprehensive test environments that replicate everything that we have. And whether it's an application upgrade or a security fix or patch, those things are tested. But again, if you think about how Patch Tuesday rolls around once a month from Microsoft, you really want to get it in as soon as you can. But that goes through testing of each one of those systems and those test environments, and then it's a focus on the orchestration of people and process. And do you have bureaucracy getting in the way that will lead you to quickly get that? And that's I think that's where we're winning.
You just don't want a patch to roll in and all of a sudden the phone scanners at every little counter don't work or something.
Absolutely, you can't have that.
I can imagine that could be an unfun situation for everybody involved. And at the end kick, is that something that you explore, the whole, what is it that's, it's just starting with routine things, let alone the higher level activities, but that
Sure.
can be cleared away?
Sure. At the end kick, we've certainly automated some aspects of our vulnerability management and coordination process. We've certainly done that through the cyber hygiene program, where we do the IP scanning. That's fully automated to include the reporting that comes, the reports that go out every week. We've automated the automated indicator sharing, where we can actually get threat indicator information from the private sector, anonymize that information, and then push that out more broadly across our partnership framework. We also have automated a couple of other ideas, not ideas, but systems where we are pushing indicators and signatures and things like that through our suite of Einstein tools and continuous diagnostics and monitoring. But I don't want to overlook the importance and the criticality of the actual individual analyst in that process. Automation is great, the technology, the processes to be more efficient, to be more effective, but the analyst is critical in that because they can pull the malware apart, they can tweak the signatures to make sure that they're tuned the right way and get them in the process. And that is something that's happening continuously in the NKIC. We have a bank of analysts that are constantly going through and looking at malware, looking at how to develop new signatures and new indicators of compromise, and then sharing that out more broadly. And I want to go back to the incident response piece. When we do an incident response and we actually learn what happened and we mitigate and recover a network, we take the information from that, we anonymize that, we develop signatures and indicators, and we push that out more broadly so that what we've learned at a particular facility or asset can be leveraged by other departments and agencies or private sector and state and local.
Okay, a good place to take a short break on, which we will do now. Our guests today are Jeff Wichman, Practice Director for Enterprise Incident Management at Optiv. Ian Doyle is Executive Security Advisor at IBM Federal. Rick Driggers is Deputy Chief of Operations at the National Cybersecurity and Communications Integration Center at Homeland Security. Paul Morris is Chief Information Security Officer and Executive Director for Information Assurance and Cybersecurity Division at the Transportation Security Administration. And Wally Coggins, Director of the IC Security Coordination Center in the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. I'm your moderator, Tom Temin. Our discussion is Incident Response in Government, sponsored by Optiv and IBM, here on federalnewsradio.com and Federal News Radio 1500 AM.